Guess we're good to go. Okay. I was going to say, we usually wait just a bit, but we're always by. Welcome, everybody, to the Utah Go user group, March 3rd. Hope you all survived the rain on your way here. Just a note to any new folks. Oh, sorry. You're an echo.
His Linux is hard.
Windows.
It's just, Linux is hard, but Windows is worse. Make sure to be aware of the microphones above your head, the green boxes. They pick up stuff really good. I think this maybe is less of a concern now that we have Mariah doing YouTube stuff for us, but.
No, it's still a concern because
Okay.
I don't do his mic.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so if you want to get picked up in the YouTube video, having a side conversation, then whisper back. If you don't want that to happen, then whisper in the back. Speakers, we have a paper call link in case you want to be formal. For the most part, just ping me or Carson on Slack, or me and Carson will maybe ping you on Slack. Feel free. This is a chill place. You don't have to take up the whole time if you feel like you'd rather give a lightning talk. It doesn't have to be super fancy, polished. I've spoken at big conferences. Like, this is a great place to just pretty easygoing environment to practice speaking and maybe trying a talk out that you've been thinking about doing, or give your first talk. Jobs. A lot of people are asking about jobs, hiring. This is a weird time in the tech ecosystem, so join the Forge Slack, come socialize, come get to know folks. We have a jobs channel where you can look at people that are trying to hire. I think there's also a channel where you can post jobs that you're trying to hire people for. It seems to be fairly active, and you know, one of the byproducts of coming here every week is we might do some networking, so it's a good place to extend that. Weave is hiring. This is new. This is big news. We're actually hiring in the U.S. I believe that we're open to remote, but obviously our building's here, so if you want to come hang out with cool people. And Carson and I work there. I think Mariah used to, for the most part. We're the only ones.
I did used to work here.
So don't ask her about her experience at Weave. Just come talk to me and Carson.
Dad?
But yeah, come chat with us if you're interested. We can let you know what jobs are available. Go check out the site. They pay for dinner for us and give us access to the building, which is really great. So this is a specific call out for them, because basically the recruiting efforts that we do here are how we pay for it. And with that, we're going to turn the time over to David. He's going to be chatting to us today about the path and filepath standard library packages. So go ahead and hand it over to you. I can go turn them down for you. Oh, the soap removed for the. It is easier to see the slides. So that makes sense. Is that good or darker?
Fine.
Okay.
That's the color of all the text.
Yeah. So it works. Yeah. Okay. How's it going, guys? My name is David Bosnic. I'll be talking to you about path and filepath, standard lib stuff. It's going to be short. Libraries themselves aren't really long. There's some little catch cases that I'm going to be talking about, but primarily it's not that crazy. So the first question is like, why is there two path, like packages in general? Think Windows. It's always Windows' fault. But generally, Unix style one, we all know it, / makes it easier. Windows style, we'll do those backslashes. It's disgusting, it's gross. I digress. Yeah, so the two packages are kind of separated to path, which is primarily like now for URLs, web rights, API endpoints, anything that uses that /. Path filepath is more OS agnostic. You can do it for Windows, Mac, and my beloved Linux. You can can do it for local systems and directories. It's just better to use that for, again, when you're working with your local file paths. And path is for anything that's just using those forward slashes. So I've opted to not do coding in real life because I like it, but it's stressful. So we're just going to use little snippets, and if we have questions, you can go from there. But you can see path, file path. We're using the join method. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But again, URLs, it just makes it easier. You have the forward slashes being placed. It's always going to be forward slashes. I will be drilling this down. Use path for just forward slashes, nothing else. If you're going to ever use something with file path for your OSs, like, again, Linux, Windows, you're going to want to use the file path one instead. They have very similar methods. Specifically, path has a shorter list, but most of them are going to be in both, so you can be easily tripped up where you're like accidentally switching one for the other. But yeah, Evo Windows, it's kind of why it's separate in the first place. So obviously, you see the pitfall. Using path when interacting with local files, or using path file path when trying to create an API endpoint. You just don't want to do it. Again, we're going to be drilling that in. Yes, that is Kirby dying. It's fun stuff. I actually checked the meetup. I saw everyone that's coming. I checked your guys' GitHubs. I looked at each and every one of these. And then these people effectively did that problem that I mentioned earlier. They used path instead of file path. You have been doxxed. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of the anatomy of file path. Because again, it's useful, it's simple, it's not that crazy. Again, we're importing file path here. Again, I'm going to be mostly talking about file path, but a lot of this stuff transcends and goes to just path. But again, // keep that in mind. So we have a full path right here. We use base. We're going to just get the end of it, main, with the extension, main.go. That's the base file path. If you go for dir, again, method, you're going to actually get the entire one with the directory in mind that houses whatever files in it. And the extension will obviously get us that extension near the end. And if you guys didn't know, extensions are just random things that people decide. They have no meaning whatsoever, except when they do. Relative path, again, you can add a string that you want to do relatively. So in this case, home user, it's right over here in this thing, or in this top section, and we get a relative path here. Okay. So
sorry, I just have a quick question on that other one.
Yeah.
So is that looks like there's an error where file path rel can fail?
Are you talking? I'm ignoring the.
Yeah. So like, what is a case when is that just if it's not a directory of your home?
If it's not relative, right?
Yeah, it's not relative. It kind of but it's,
Is that an error or a Boolean?
It's on the documentation page. I looked this up recently. It's if it can't tell what the relative path is between the two paths. So if you have two paths that aren't related in a way in which it can tell how they're related to one another, that's when it
errors
errors out. Now, what that use case is, I don't know, but I imagine it looks like a bunch of // going in different directions.
there. So if your relative path isn't relative enough, it fails. So I'm going to talk about a notable function. I think clean is really important. It's generally if you can mess it up, clean will clean most of it, right? If you can see here that we have kind of // some //. These have meanings, but obviously it's not what we want from our input text. Clean actually provides us a nice streamlined one. Multiple slashes get also cleaned up, as well as these relative paths over here. If we look at that beginning, it gets cleaned up. Really important thing to note, if you have an empty string, it will go to the current directory. It will return a current directory. Clean is very important because it actually is used in pretty much every single method after the fact. So it'll try to, or after, but it'll try to clean the output for you. So make sure you like don't double into it, but again, clean is really important when you want to do specific things.
What does it do if you like back out of the root directory that you're like, if I say dot, like what does it give me? Does it just fail or does it give me the
Clean?
directory or?
For clean or for?
For clean, yeah.
For
So if I
clean?
have more dots than I have paths.
It doesn't validate. It just makes sure that whatever string interpretation of your path is a potential path, but it doesn't validate if it exists on the system or if it.
But what he's asking is like, what if I'm 2 directories in and I have 3 dots? And so I'm only 2 directories in and I try to go back 3 times. It roots you at the root. So if you do enough dots, eventually it just stops it. Like you can't go negative.
Okay.
So just ignore it and say you're already at the root and can't go back further.
The current directory or whatever.
Override the double dot, pretend you didn't.
That's where the error is. If your first argument is /foo, second argument is /bar, it wouldn't know what foo is relative to bar.
And filepath cleaning is not a substitution for like jailing, right? It's like it obviously can't tell you when you traverse like symlinks and all sorts of other silly stuff. But
I was gonna say, and it looks like it does allow you to, I mean, it will allow reverse navigation just fine as long as it knows what the string will be. But the output of this is just a string path, right?
Yeah, so again, like no validation for it, but it'll try to make things that work relative. And speaking of symlinks, I mean, later on I talk about it, but that's an important thing to note about one function. I'll mention that later. Yeah, but yeah, if you're going to do stuff like this, don't try to append things together unless you really, really know what you're doing. Carson was actually telling me an interesting thing. There is constants you can use. I didn't actually put them in the slides, but there are constants, OS constants that acknowledge which build you're using. So Go will be like if you're on Windows and building it, it'll change the constant for if you're using // or // or / relative. That was kind of interesting, but if most of the time you can just use join, and join acknowledges what you're doing a lot better. So yeah, don't append unless you know what you're doing. Split is pretty simple. Again, it splits it into directory and file. Really cool thing to note, this is a little bit of an edge case, is it actually gives that leading slash. So if you're not expecting that, it will provide it. Just be aware of that. But again, splits it up. I just added this one recently.
well, and let me be clear about, sorry, go back. I'm going to ask a question, and I'm assuming you know the answer. Why not just use string split?
It goes back to agnostic, because string.split doesn't, like, you are, I gotta explain it like this. If string.split won't recognize this entire section as a directory, you might be able to like you could mentally say like, oh, I get that's the directory, like where it is right here. But say you're doing some like automated system where you're trying to do something like that, string.split, you couldn't recognize when that's the end unless you did some funky magic. And again, it's not OS agnostic, which is the big thing about why you're using file path stuff instead of just manual string interpretations and stuff like that.
And what does split do if there's no, like if the last thing is a directory, then it just gives you the root dir and then?
Yeah, it gives you an empty string for like a file.
Okay.
If you give it just a file, it'll give an empty dir.
Okay.
Yeah, globbing's really cool. If you didn't know what globbing is, it's like my favorite thing to do absolutely ever on the terminal. It'll just be a wildcard, so any kind of possible value that could be here, it can be any kind of sentence. It'll be pushed in there, so it could be app, it could be error, it could be debug. So it's going to go ahead and check all of the potential things in this case that have .log at the end of it with that wildcard previously. You can also do something like, I don't know, version.wildcard, and it'll give you all the subtypes. It's useful for like PDF stuff and kind of, what I like to do it for is when doing like text or like file type conversions. You're allowed to use like PDFs and Word docs and all that if you know about that kind of stuff. Pretty useful. What was this one file? Oh yeah, forgot about that one. If you're going to like try to find a file, you don't really need to glob and then like check the array and be like, oh, I finally found what I'm looking for. Just use the match function. It gives you a Boolean in return. It makes it a lot easier and potential errors that might occur with like improper file path. Yeah, so again, I'm nailing this in. Path has a lot of the functions mentioned before, not globbing, but a lot of the functions mentioned before. And it's really important to state that if you're talking about paths like URL, API endpoints, or stuff like that, you want to stick with the path. You don't want to use file path. But if you are doing OS file path directory systems and stuff like that, just use file path. It's in the name, files, you're using files. And a few gotchas that I got for specifically little edge cases here and there. File path extension, well again, grab that last extension on the end. If you do like a .gunzip, so gunzip usually has tar.gunzip, it's just going to give you gunzip, it's not going to give you the last two. Hidden files, Linux, Unix stuff, you're just not going to get anything because you don't have the pre-appending variable or name before it. And if you do like file dot, it will just give you a dot. So common blunder, make sure you don't do that. And this would just give you the current directory, which again is not what you want.
And
Yeah.
that hidden file, if it was like hidden.txt, like, then it will give you the extension, right?
Yeah, okay, pretty sure, pretty sure. Strings.has prefix is not really, it shouldn't be used, again, because of Windows. We don't want to have those reverse paths, that C drive, we don't want it to be used, it wouldn't validate our information properly. So just a better way of using is filepath.absolute, so you get a verification, or is absolute, to tell you if it's an absolute or not. Is that good? Yeah. Okay, I was just making sure. Yeah, so again, I mentioned earlier, a lot of these functions are cleaned afterwards or cleaned during the process, so you don't actually need to re-clean it. It's not going to change performance that much. It's not performative or anything like that, but it's a good thing to know because then you have just cleaner code. Clarity is easier, so you don't need to clean most of the time. What I would recommend cleaning is if you're getting like user input for specific file paths, then you can clean it. But a very important thing is, again, clean does not validate. You can have someone try to like access certain files without your acknowledgement and stuff like that. Clean doesn't magically make it safe. Very important to know. It just makes it readable and usable. And so this is what Carson recommended I talk about a little bit at the end. Thought it was interesting. So I'll try my best to answer questions, but walk versus walkdir. So walking down a file path, generally you get from the root node, you get a function call every single time that goes through each individual file. The important thing to note is both walk and walkdir read the entire directory into memory before it does the walking. And generally what happens is there's a recursive tree call. Walk uses OS lstat on every single instance. It's old. It's not really recommended to use. And walkdir is more of a newer version. It happened in 1.16. Probably exactly on that one. And it's more efficient. It uses less memory. And again, I'm pretty sure this one is more OS agnostic. Both read the entire directory again before walking. A couple things to note. File path walkdir is not the same as IO fs.walkdir. This one does not do the OS safe // so be careful when you're using this one. If you're just using file path stuff in general, I would just recommend walkdir, again, unless you know what you're doing. And then walk uses, I spelled that wrong. File path and walk func, while walkdir uses the fs walkdir func. Again, different kind of function skeletons, but they provide, this one's again outdated, this one's more newer, this one's more efficient, and doesn't, again, use ls or lstat on every single call. So if you wanted like a lot of information, you could use walk, but most of the time we're not needing. I think walkdir gets as much information as you need, but again, if you need a lot of information, I would say maybe walk. Okay. Pretty much it. Again, like I felt like I could have, you know, maybe went a little bit more in detail with certain stuff, but it's a pretty simple package that has just a nuance of like, this is path, this is file path. If you're using your OS stuff, just use file path. If you're not, you can use path. That's pretty much the headline of it, with some little bit of edge cases here and there. Do you have any questions?
So the only reason I can really see to use path is if you are, or the only failure case, I guess, is you need to use path if you're on Windows and you're trying to do URLs.
Yeah.
Okay. Because otherwise it's like, you won't notice that you're running into problems because path and file path behave the same.
I see a lot of people using file path to build URLs, and I'm like, this is great while you're on a Linux or like Mac. But as soon as someone on Windows runs it, it's like you're breaking all your URLs. Like there's a whole other pseudo version of this that is not going to have those weird file paths.
Yeah, so URL, API, endpoint, just anything web related.
Firestore, the one that bit me, I'll tell you the things that bit me a lot are Firestore, because Firestore uses slash to separate collections and documents when it's building IDs. It uses kind of path syntax like this collection, users, and user A, phone numbers, phone number 1. Build those paths. The auto cleaning from both path and file path might has bitten us before because we've had an empty like user ID, and instead of getting an error because a section of the identifier was empty, I just had 3 segments to a thing that I thought was going to have 4 segments because it takes those empty elements and just pretends they didn't exist. Like that cleaning has bitten me before when there are cases where I'd rather there be 2 slashes in the result that show that there was no user ID given when I built that string for the path than pretend that never passed that segment. So like there are downsides, like there are cases where you would even use strings.join when you say, I don't want the cleaning. Like that's the one case I say don't use it, is if you, what happens if one of those elements is empty? Like, do you want it to auto clean those out and like simplify them for you? That could actually end up causing bugs.
Yeah, I mean, even like an empty string does current directory, gives you a dot. And like,
Which is very weird, right? Like,
yeah, sometimes you don't even want that kind of thing. So again, like Carson said, great. Most of the time you just use these things without fear whatsoever. But if there is a specific use case where you want to start appending stuff together, that's again very specific, and it's useful to have that in the back of your mind when you're working on something. And it's like, why is this breaking randomly? This feels wrong. It's usually the case. But any
That's
questions?
good.
Does anyone have any idea why there's like so much churn in the file walk function specifically? Like, there's only 3 different versions of that.
So one reads the directory inode. So in the early days, there wasn't as much of a difference in cost between reading the file information versus reading directory information. But now, and I could be wrong about this, but it's something like this. The underlying file systems like ZFS and EXTFS and all of those have different ways of like layering the blocks where like sometimes the file is included in the directory if it's under 4 kilobytes, blah, blah, blah. So the performance characteristics of reading the directory metadata is very different from the performance characteristics of reading the metadata of the files in the directory. So when you have something where you know you're going to iterate over every single file, if you have very, very, very large directories, like say you've got 4,000 files, like say you're doing hash-based chunks, so it's like, 4 characters each and they go down however deep. The file metadata on that, or especially if it's bigger, if you've got 1 million files in a directory, that becomes really intense too. So you don't want to put all of that into memory, so you'd still, even if you wanted to open up all the files in the directory, you'd still want to limit it to just one at a time. Then, if you remember back in the early days, the embed package didn't exist.
Yep.
And so people had to write their own virtual file system implementations, and so that's why we got IOFS, is so that it handles embed in those situations gracefully, and so the walk implementation there is yet different again, just mainly because it's an interface rather than a concrete file system.
So, great, TLDR is use Walker,
I'm good, that's great.
walking a physical directory, and use IO walking an embedded directory. Is that sort of the takeaway?
Yeah, and you could still use walk as long as you know that the performance characteristics are good.
Okay. Interesting.
You know, you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot with walk.
Done it before, so.
You can
Yeah. Enjoy your rest of the night, guys. Thank you for having me.